At 12:30 in the morning on Friday, June 3rd, 2011, 20-year-old University of Indiana sophomore Lauren Spierer left her apartment for a night out with friends. After visiting a group of friends at a nearby apartment, Lauren headed into downtown Bloomington, Indiana, where she used a fake ID to get into Kilroy's sports bar. 2 hours later, Lauren is caught on surveillance footage exiting the bar, having left behind her shoes and cell phone. Lauren is last seen on surveillance footage at 2:51 a.m., exiting an alley and walking toward an empty lot. Lauren's purse and keys would later be found by investigators in this alley. This is the last verifiable sighting of Lauren. According to a friend who claims to have last seen Lauren, she left his apartment and was observed at 4:30 a.m., walking to the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue. When no one can reach Lauren the next day, friends and family grow concerned and report her as a missing person. Lauren's companions that evening would become key suspects, in addition to the unidentified driver of a white truck seen in the area from which Lauren is said to have vanished. Theories begin to develop, and speculation points an accusatory finger at Lauren's friends, while others debate whether Lauren's disappearance was murder or the result of an accidental overdose of illegal and prescription drugs. As time goes by, fewer and fewer leads are developed as Lauren's case grows cold. A few years later, the shocking and horrifying murder of Indiana University student Hannah Wilson will bring Lauren's name back into the headlines, and many begin to wonder if Lauren met the same fate as Hannah at the hands of the same suspect. This is the Trace Evidence Podcast, Episode 3, The Disappearance of Lauren Spierer. Welcome to the Trace Evidence Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pacheco. Today's case involves the mysterious disappearance of 20-year-old University of Indiana student Lauren Spierer. It's a complex case with a lot of people involved and a lot of theories about what could have happened. Before we move into the details of the case, just a few quick things I want to address and go over. Over the past few weeks, I've been working on getting Trace Evidence to be available on as many platforms as I could. As of today, you can find Trace Evidence on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, and Google Play Music. Any app which has access to these feeds, such as Overcast, should give you the ability to subscribe and listen. I've noticed that iTunes updates the feed within a few hours, while Stitcher and others usually take a little longer to show new episodes. However, if there's an app you use or one you would suggest that Trace Evidence isn't currently on, let me know, and I'll be happy to get the show on it. You can contact me through several different methods. Trace Evidence has a Twitter account, which you can find at TraceEvPod. That's TraceEvPod on Twitter. Feel free to tweet at me and follow for episode updates and links to other media. In addition to Twitter, you can email me at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. That's TraceEvidencepod@gmail.com. Trace Evidence also has a Facebook group that you can join simply by searching for Trace Evidence Podcast. The group is locked so that you can post without it showing up on your timeline for your friends and family to see. Simply request to join, and it will be approved as soon as possible. I have received several emails, seen new members enter the Facebook group, and gotten a few new followers on Twitter. I hope you're all enjoying the show, and I'm looking forward to releasing future episodes. I usually respond to tweets, emails, and Facebook posts as soon as I can. However, since I've gotten asked similar questions or been contacted about similar theories or concerns recently, I was thinking about the possibility of doing a special Q&A episode of the podcast in the future. I would release it outside of the normal schedule, and it wouldn't impact the release of future episodes. If you're interested in participating or have a question or comment you've been wanting to ask, please email it to me or tweet it to me. If you're enjoying the podcast, please give us a review on iTunes. The more positive reviews the show can get, the more exposure it can get, and the more attention can come to these cases. I really do enjoy doing this podcast, having spent so much of my life reading and studying these cases. It feels good to be doing something with that information, even if it's only bringing attention to them. In each of the cases presented on Trace Evidence, there is a person or persons who know the truth of what happened and holds the key to bringing someone home or answering the questions that have been haunting their family and investigators. Maybe that person is someone you know, or maybe that person is you. Today, we look into the case of Lauren Spierer. When Lauren left home to attend the University of Indiana, her parents never thought she wouldn't be coming home. The more you look into this tragic story, the deeper it goes and the more confusing it becomes. Where is Lauren Spierer? Lauren Spierer was a 20-year-old college sophomore when she mysteriously disappeared. Despite multiple witnesses spotting her on the last night she was seen, including footage from surveillance cameras and direct statements from friends with whom she spent large portions of the night, she seemingly vanished into thin air. Of course, when digging deeper into the details of the case and what is known of Lauren, her friends and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, what once seemed like a straightforward case quickly becomes a convoluted mess of contradictions and secrets. Lauren was raised in Scarsdale, a town of about 17,000 in Westchester County, New York. According to friends and family, Lauren was a sharp young woman who, the summer prior to her disappearance, had spent her time planting trees in Israel. Lauren had attended Camp Tawanda, a co-ed sleepaway camp located in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. At Camp Tawanda, Lauren met several people with whom she would attend Indiana University. It was here that she met Jesse Wolfe, her boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, as well as Jay Rosenbaum, the last person to see her alive. At Indiana University in Bloomington, Lauren was studying textiles and merchandising. Lauren was a petite girl, standing just 4'11" and weighing in at 95 pounds. She had striking blue eyes and light blonde hair. For all intents and purposes, Lauren seemed to be doing well at balancing her school life with her social life. She shared an apartment in a small wood plaza with her roommate, Hader Tamir. What is known about the night that Lauren vanished is pieced together by witness statements, surveillance camera footage, and the results of police and private investigation. This case involves several different individuals, and it would be easiest to address each person as they come into the story by way of the official timeline of events. It should be noted that there is a lot of debate and speculation regarding Lauren's drinking and possible drug use. At this particular point in time, it's nearly impossible to get an exact answer as to whether or not Lauren was a casual or a habitual user of drugs, or if she used them at all. Lauren's parents have adamantly argued that Lauren did not have a drug problem, while the parents of her then boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe, as well as other friends, have stated otherwise. What cannot be argued is that on the evening she disappeared, Lauren was witnessed drinking alcohol, and this may have played a role in her disappearance. Lauren's parents stated that she had a heart condition known as long QT syndrome. According to the Mayo Clinic, long QT syndrome is a heart rhythm condition that can potentially cause fast, chaotic heartbeats. These rapid heartbeats might trigger a sudden fainting spell or seizure. In some cases, the heart can beat erratically for so long that it causes sudden death. This condition can become aggravated by the use of drugs and alcohol, which can be a fatal combination. According to the official timeline, late in the evening on June 2, 2011, Lauren dresses in a white tank top, white blouse, and black leggings, with plans to go out into downtown Bloomington. On this particular evening, Lauren is accompanied by David Rohn, a fellow student who lives in the same building. The two set out on a half-mile walk from their building in the Smallwood Plaza to 5 North Town Homes, another student apartment complex. Here they arrive at the apartment of Jay Rosenbaum and meet Corey Rossman, Rosenbaum's neighbor. David Rohn is a 19-year-old University of Indiana student originally from Manhattan. In the wake of Lauren's disappearance, he is questioned by the FBI and submits to a polygraph test, which he passes. According to Rohn, he returned to his apartment around 12:30 a.m. on June 3rd, after spending time with Lauren and the others at the 5 North Town Homes complex. According to the timeline, Rohn would have headed back to his apartment while Lauren remained at the 5 North Town Homes complex. According to the Bloomington Police Department, Lauren leaves the 5 North Town Homes complex and arrives at Kilroy's Sports Bar at approximately 1:46 a.m. Lauren uses a fake ID to gain access to the bar. According to the locals, the bar, commonly referred to as Sports, has multiple bars inside, a large outdoor patio, and 2 levels. Although Lauren is reported as arriving at Sports, there is no specification on whether or not she was alone, and this seems to be somewhat of a topic of debate. What is known for sure is that at 2:27 a.m., Lauren exits sports in the company of Corey Rossman. Interestingly, when Lauren exits sports, she has left behind both her shoes and her cell phone. Later, some will use this as a way to illustrate Lauren's alleged level of intoxication. Also, due to her cell phone being left behind, there is no way to use pings or cell phone records to track her location after this time. Walking 2 blocks from sports, Lauren and Rossman arrive back at Smallwood Plaza, boarding an elevator to the 5th floor where her apartment is. Somewhere between the elevator and Lauren's apartment door, Rossman is punched in the face. The punch leaves a bruise, and reportedly Rossman is somewhat disoriented following the incident. Details are sketchy, but from what I've been able to piece together, multiple sources reported that the man who struck Rossman was Indiana University student Zach Oakes. Allegedly, Oakes noticed Lauren's level of drunkenness and asked her if she's alright. Rossman responds saying, quote, "She's okay, I got it," end quote. Allegedly, Oakes then tells Rossman that he should take Lauren home as she seems to be out of it, at which point Rossman curses or says something disparaging to Oakes, resulting in Oakes punching him. Rossman would later claim that this blow to the head caused a concussion, which, in turn, results in a loss of memory for the remainder of that night. The entire incident is marred in contention, as some statements have made it appear as though this altercation occurred in the hallway outside of Lauren's apartment, while other descriptions have made it sound as though it took place outside of the complex itself. Regardless, what is known for certain is that whether it was because of the altercation or for some other unknown reason, Lauren does not enter her apartment at this point in time and instead leaves the complex with Rossman. Corey Rossman is attending the University of Indiana, originally from the Boston suburbs, and reportedly met Lauren several days before her disappearance. More on him later. At 2:48 a.m., Lauren enters an alleyway which runs between College Avenue and Morton Street. Security cameras capture her exiting the alleyway at 2:51 a.m., walking toward an empty lot near the 5 North Townhomes complex. Bloomington police report that Lauren is spotted on security camera footage somewhere between her apartment and the exit of the alleyway in the company of a person whom the police have chosen not to name. Also, upon later investigation, Lauren's keys and purse are recovered from this alley. Why her keys and purse were left in the alley is unknown, but Lauren does not appear to be in distress upon exiting. It is at this point that Lauren and Rossman return to his apartment, which he shares with his roommate, Mike Beth. Beth has stayed in this evening, studying and working on papers that are due later that day. According to Beth, upon their arrival, Rossman is heavily intoxicated and stumbling. Rossman reportedly vomits on the carpet on his way upstairs, and Beth aids Rossman, helping him into bed. 2 different versions of the story exist here. According to one version, Beth returns downstairs from helping Rossman to bed, and Lauren has already left. However, in another version, Beth attempts to persuade Lauren to spend the night, seeing that she's heavily intoxicated. Allegedly, Lauren refuses, saying that she wants to go back to her own apartment that night. At 3:30 a.m., Beth places a phone call to Jay Rosenbaum, his neighbor and the man that Lauren and David Rohn had visited earlier in the night. He informs Rosenbaum that Lauren is drunk and trying to get him to have more drinks with her. He asks Rosenbaum if he could possibly take Lauren in and keep an eye on her. Lauren enters Rosenbaum's apartment, where he notes a bruise under one of her eyes, but Lauren is unable to explain where or how she got it. At approximately 4:15 a.m., 2 phone calls are placed from Rosenbaum's phone. The first is to David Rohn, the man Lauren began the evening with. Rohn doesn't answer, and a second call is placed to a different friend who does not answer either. Approximately 15 minutes later, at 4:30 a.m., Lauren informs Rosenbaum that she wants to head home to her own apartment. Rosenbaum reports seeing Lauren for the final time at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue, heading south on College Avenue. In this final sighting, Lauren is dressed in a white tank top, black leggings, and no shoes. Speculatively mixed into the official timeline are 2 specific incidents which cannot be fully verified. According to a bar manager, around 3:38 a.m., he witnessed a mysterious figure throwing an intoxicated girl, matching Lauren's description, over his shoulder. This takes place near 10th Street and College Avenue. Police investigate this tip, but cannot verify, and surveillance camera evidence fails to support it. However, John Cutter, a private investigator hired by Lauren's family, says he interviewed this witness and believes his account. He believes that the woman was Lauren, but he thinks it's highly possible that the witness got the time wrong, and this is why the police couldn't verify it. A second unverified account comes from a homeless man who reports hearing a woman scream around 4:35 a.m. Who the man was couldn't be known for sure, though speculation led investigators to link this report to a known vagrant in the area. However, the man passed away just a few days after Lauren vanished. In the early afternoon of June 3rd, Jesse Wolfe, Lauren's boyfriend who lives in a house just north of campus, tried to reach Lauren. After several attempts, an employee at Sports informs Jesse that the phone was left in the bar the night before. At this point, Wolfe reaches out to Lauren's roommate, Hadair Tamir, who meets him on campus and gives him a spare key so that he can get into their apartment and check on Lauren. Finally, around 4:30 p.m., approximately 12 hours after Lauren is last seen, friends report her as missing to the Bloomington Police Department. Lauren's parents now receive the phone call no parents ever want to hear and quickly make their way to Bloomington. Bloomington police investigate the disappearance, tracing back over Lauren's steps, securing surveillance footage, and questioning witnesses in an attempt to piece together exactly what happened to Lauren. Several theories begin to emerge in the days following her disappearance, with accusations and fingers being pointed at those who were with her that evening, and also at her boyfriend of the time, Jesse Wolfe. Lauren's parents strongly believe that the men who were with her that evening, Rosenbaum and Rossman in particular, know more than they are telling. They say the same about Jesse Wolfe. This is further aggravated by the men's refusal to take polygraph tests issued by the Bloomington police. According to a legal representative for the men, they do not trust the Bloomington police and have taken independent polygraphs, including ones given by the FBI. Based on Lauren's level of intoxication, Lauren's parents theorize that something was put in her drink during her time at Sports. However, friends and even Lauren's boyfriend state that Lauren used drugs on the night in question and that she regularly used drugs. Jesse Wolfe's mother issued a statement that Lauren had previously been asked to leave Camp Towanda due to her drug use, though Lauren's parents deny the allegation. When interviewed by investigators, Jay Rosenbaum informs them that Lauren snorted cocaine and crushed up Klonopin tablets the evening she disappeared, in addition to consuming alcohol. If true, this behavior combined with her heart issue could very well have been a deadly combination. From this statement, theories begin to grow that Lauren may have suffered from an overdose, or that her use negatively impacted her heart, resulting in her death, and that the guy she was with that evening disposed of her body to avoid charges. Although the Bloomington police don't rule this out, they do state that there are many other possibilities, including abduction by a stranger. According to the Bloomington police, Lauren had been arrested on September 2, 2010, 9 months prior to her disappearance, on charges of public intoxication and illegal consumption. In the course of the search for her, police found a small amount of cocaine in her room. In the aftermath of Lauren's disappearance, scrutiny is leveled at anyone who appears to be remotely connected to the case. The spotlight of curiosity is especially bright when focusing on the men who were around Lauren that evening, specifically Jay Rosenbaum, Michael Beth, Corey Rossman, and even Lauren's boyfriend Jesse Wolfe. These men retained legal representation within days of the disappearance. In the case of Jesse Wolfe, it is reported that he spoke to Lauren early in the evening before she went out, but that she had told him that she didn't have any plans and wasn't going out. Wolfe stayed in that evening, watching the NBA Final Four, and went to bed around 2:30 a.m. This is corroborated by his roommate. Wolfe was reportedly involved in search efforts for Lauren in the days following her disappearance, but his parents eventually arrived and took him back home to Port Washington, New York. Reportedly, Lauren was still in Bloomington in June, waiting on Wolfe to finish off a summer course, after which they had plans to travel to the East Coast together. Bloomington police took a DNA swab from Corey Rossman, who denied any knowledge of what could have happened to Lauren. In a statement issued by Rossman, he said, quote, I was not the last person with her, and that's all I can say. I'm sorry." End quote. Rossman has been accused of being uncooperative, but his lawyer contradicts this statement. Rossman maintains that he cannot be of much help, having lost his memory after being punched earlier in the evening. Lauren's parents would go on to file a civil suit against Jay Rosenbaum, Corey Rossman, and Michael Beth. The suit alleged negligence, stating that the men supplied Lauren with alcohol after she was already visibly intoxicated and failed to assure she got home safely, which likely resulted in her death. In 2013, federal judge Tanya Pratt dismissed the suit against Beth, stating that he had no duty to care for Lauren. In 2014, Pratt dismissed the case against the other two, stating, quote, "Unfortunately, there could be any number of theories as to what happened to Lauren and what, if any, injury she may have sustained. Without evidence to prove these theories, it would be impossible for a jury to determine if whatever happened to Speier was a natural or probable consequence of her intoxication without any intervening acts that would break the causal chain." End quote. No charges have ever been officially filed against any of the three men. Another theory revolves around a white truck. On the night of Lauren's disappearance, not far from where she was last seen, a white truck was caught on surveillance video. It was theorized that the driver of the vehicle could have spotted Lauren and, noting her vulnerability due to intoxication, could have abducted her. There have been several links made to white trucks and possible suspects. One suspect, James McLeish, was implicated but passed a polygraph and was, for now, ruled out. A second suspect, Justin Wagers, a man accused of exposing himself to numerous women, lived with his parents in Martinsville, Indiana, approximately 20 miles north of Bloomington. On January 28, 2016, the FBI along with the Bloomington police raided his parents' home. Dirt near the barn was removed, the property was searched by cadaver dogs, and a white truck was towed from the property. Police would not comment on what evidence was found, if any. Another theory involves someone known as the Naked Gunman. Corey Hammersley is incarcerated at Indiana State Prison. Hammersley is a former student at the University of Indiana who found himself caught up in the dark web of the drug scene. A year after Lauren vanished, Hammersley got high and had a breakdown. During the incident, Hammersley stepped outside wearing nothing but a hat and fired off 32 shots. Many shots went into neighbors' homes and a car, but several shots were sent towards responding officers. While in prison, another inmate claims that when a news report appeared on the TV and showed Lauren's picture, Hammersley is alleged to have said, quote, "Man, I knew the guys that did that," end quote. According to the witness, Hammersley stated that, quote, "They were drinking heavily and doing ecstasy. She OD'd. It scared them. They didn't know what to do with her, and they took her down to the Ohio River and got rid of her, disposed of the body," end quote. When interviewed about this, Hammersley denied ever saying it or knowing anything about Lauren. However, the scenario seems close to what many speculate is the most likely, that Lauren suffered some issue that evening, possibly related to drugs, alcohol, and her heart condition, and someone she was with that night knows more than they are saying. As the years have passed, Lauren's parents have made claims that the Bloomington police have not been open with them, giving them little information or in some cases no information at all. It is alleged that the police are in possession of further video and photographic evidence from the night showing Lauren, and that they have not released it for reasons which the Speier family can't understand. Typically, in these cases, you want to get as much information out as soon as possible. The Bloomington Police Department has said time and again that they continue to investigate this case and that they have been very upfront with the Speier family. 4 years after Lauren's disappearance, a grisly crime shocks the city of Bloomington. The crime shares startling similarities to Lauren's case, and ultimately may shine light on what might have happened to her. On April 24th, 2015, the beaten and bloody body of Hannah Wilson, a University of Indiana student, is discovered. During the course of the investigation, speculation grows that there could be a link between the murder of Hannah Wilson and the disappearance of Lauren Spierer. When Hannah's body was discovered, a cell phone was also recovered. Initially believing it to be Hannah's, investigators quickly discovered that the cell phone does in fact belong to the killer. Police linked the cell phone to Daniel Messel, a 49-year-old print shop employee. Messel has a criminal history relating to violence towards women. He in fact did time in prison for hitting his own grandmother in the head with a 2x4. When police arrive at Messel's home, they find his SUV is packed for travel. In a bag, they find clothes soaked in Hannah Wilson's blood. In the SUV, they also find Hannah Wilson's hair. On the night in question, Messel is playing bar trivia at Yogi's Bar, located a few blocks away from Kilroy's Sports Bar, also known as Sports. This is the same bar Lauren Spierer had been in, and the very bar in which Hannah Wilson is partying with her friends. Security cameras later catch Messel driving up and down the street in his SUV, and then again, following behind a cab which contains Hannah Wilson. Hannah enters her home and then exits. It is speculated she walks outside to see if she dropped her license. At some point, however, Hannah ends up inside Messel's SUV. According to police, Messel knocks Hannah Wilson out and plans to take her to a desolate cavernous area 15 miles outside of Bloomington. However, a bridge is out this evening, and Hannah wakes up. At this point, Messel savagely beats Hannah to death. The murder weapon is never located, although it is believed to be a MacLeod flashlight. During the trial, several women come forward to accuse Messel of stalking and assault. One law student accuses Messel of attempting to rape her, and a partial DNA test from the incident matches that of Messel. Prosecutors believe that Messel was also involved in the disappearance of Lauren Spierer. According to prosecuting attorney Ted Adams, quote, "The similarities that I know involving Hannah Wilson and Lauren Spierer. Obviously you have Indiana University students, young, attractive Indiana University students. They were both consuming alcohol, and that she was around the same 8-block radius of where Hannah Wilson was plucked out." End quote. Ted Adams is then contacted by a man named David Hayden, who claims to have helped Messel move Lauren Spierer's body. It's believed that Hayden and Messel did time together back in the 1990s. In one particular letter, Hayden writes that Lauren's body was, quote, "dressed in black stretch yoga pants, white shirt, and dark thong, no bra, with several rings on one hand," end quote. This does match the description of what Lauren was last seen wearing. Messel denies knowing Hayden, or having any connection to Lauren's case. In August of 2016, Messel was found guilty in the murder of Hannah Wilson and was sentenced to 80 years. Lauren's parents resigned themselves to the belief that their daughter is dead, even before the Hannah Wilson case came to light. They hope, beyond hope, for information regarding their daughter, and at this point can only bear to hope for the recovery of her body. Bloomington police cannot comment on whether or not there is a link between Daniel Messel and the disappearance of Lauren Spierer. However, for Lauren's mother, it seems highly likely. In an interview, Charlene Speier stated, quote, "I do feel like there's a possibility that Daniel Messel could have been involved in Lauren's disappearance. You know, unfortunately, we don't have any evidence because we don't have Lauren's body. But now, this is the second case that's very similar, seemingly, to what happened to Lauren." End quote. Without evidence, there can be no link to Messel. Lauren's parents still hold out that eventually the answers of what happened to their daughter will come to the surface, and they might be able to grant her a proper burial. Lauren Spierer's disappearance is a tragic, cautionary tale. No parent expects their child to go away to college and vanish. However, it's a reminder that no city, no college campus, no place is perfectly safe. There are so many theories in this case, many of which I simply didn't include because they seem to be little more than blatant speculation with no evidentiary foundation. However, those which I've discussed today are the ones considered most likely and those which have gained and maintained life over the years. The college party scene is well known. I didn't attend an out-of-state college, but I did visit friends who did, and I certainly got a picture of what that party world is like. I once visited a friend attending school in upstate New York. The first night I arrived involved us wandering around downtown to one of the local bars, drinking cheap beer for hours, and slowly stumbling back to the dorm, where the group of us continued drinking until the early morning hours. During the night, I saw large groups and solo individuals stumbling drunkenly around the main streets, across front lawns, on the college campus, and everywhere in between. Most of the people in our group were underage, and yet we were able to get in and drink without a problem. There were certainly plenty of drugs going around, and although those weren't my scene, several people in my group indulged. This didn't seem out of the place for me or odd at the time. We were college kids, partying. Isn't this what everyone did? Lauren Spierer was not the first, and sadly she won't be the last, college sophomore to go out and party too much. However, in Lauren's case, her night out never ended for her friends and family who will always wonder what could have happened to her. I decided to discuss Lauren's drug use for several reasons. The key reason was the revelation that she suffered from a heart condition that could become fatal when mixed with drugs and alcohol. Another reason was in the hopes as to be as accurate as possible and to lay out a detailed image of what may have happened to Lauren. Finally, her possible drug use would lend itself to an impaired state at the time of her disappearance, which could make her an easy target for someone looking to get their hands on a pretty young college girl. However, from all the case details I have read, Lauren's behavior that night isn't all that different from what is happening right now on college campuses all around the world. In regard to the case itself, several questions popped up, which lend or take away credence from some of the theories, depending on your point of view. The first theory I read, and the one which seems to be all over the internet, is that one or more of the guys Lauren was with that night either did something to Lauren or reacted poorly when something bad happened to her. Given Lauren's medical issues, it's not hard to imagine that at any point in the night, she could have passed out or become incapacitated or even died. Being in the company of any number of drunk, drugged up, and scared college kids in one of their apartments, it isn't hard to imagine the panic and poor decisions that could be made in those moments. It's entirely possible that Lauren passed away and the reaction was to find a way to get rid of the evidence, which in this case would be the body. However, the more you examine it, if it were something such as that, I just don't see getting rid of her as a viable option. I think someone would have called the police or an ambulance. Yes, there were drugs around, and yes, they could be held responsible. But it seems an extreme step to get rid of the body of a friend rather than get her help. Wouldn't it be just as easy to put her out in the hallway and call the police, or simply call the police and get rid of any drugs or illegal substances that might be around before they arrive? It seems like a large leap in logic for them to have gone to that extreme. Some theorize that rather than a toxic mixture of drugs, alcohol, and her heart condition, that one or some combination of the guys she was with that night did something to Lauren. Obviously, this is possible, and considering the high numbers of assaults on women on college campuses, it has to be considered. Suffice it to say, the story doesn't make sense, but then again, you're dealing with a group of people who have been drinking, partying, and doing drugs for hours. Their actions are not necessarily going to make sense. The memory loss in relation to the punch seems a little too convenient given the circumstances, but it's not an impossibility. If any of these guys know what happened to Lauren, they've kept it quiet for 6 years now. However, other than the fact that Lauren was with them that night, there's no evidence pointing towards them as having done anything to her. She appears to be fine on surveillance footage and continues to remain in the company of one and then the other for much of the night. One piece of the puzzle I can't understand is the visit to Lauren's apartment complex, which ultimately results in Lauren not entering her own apartment. Why walk there, enter the building, take the elevator to your floor, but not go inside? In addition to this, in the final sighting of Lauren, she is said to be heading back to her apartment, but we know from police that her purse and her keys are found in an alleyway, having left them there earlier in the night. I suppose she could have banged on the door until her roommate answered. It may be foolish to use logical thought when trying to interpret the things going on in a person's head who is drunk. What bothers me most about this last sighting is the sighting itself. Maybe it's just me, but I can't imagine letting a female friend of mine walk home by herself, without her shoes, without her phone, at 4:30 in the morning when I know that she's very drunk. You'd think a decent enough guy would offer to walk her home, but I guess it's not a crime to not do the right thing. Obviously, Lauren's then boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe, was looked at early on in the case. When your significant other disappears, you're almost always one of the prime suspects from day one. However, in Jesse's case, There doesn't appear to be a lot of comment from the police in regard to his possible involvement, other than saying that he would, of course, be on the suspect list. Lauren's friends describe Jesse as a very loving boyfriend, and by all accounts, there doesn't seem to be any evidence to suggest he had any reason to do something to Lauren. According to his roommate, he was home that night and went to bed around 2:30 in the morning. It's strange that he lawyered up so fast and took part in the search for such a short period of time, but this could be attributed to any number of factors. Whereas some are going to look at getting a lawyer early as a sign of guilt, others view this as a smart move. Young men don't always handle themselves well and can make foolish statements in moments of stress, anger, or desperation. With the heavy flood of media coverage, it isn't necessarily a bad idea to have someone there who can guide you through the process. The same can be said for Rosenbaum, Beth, and Rossman, who also got lawyers very quickly. The white truck theory seems like a stretch. It's entirely plausible that some guy was driving around in a white truck that evening looking for trouble. But there are a lot of white trucks out there, and simply because some are registered to criminals doesn't make that connection solid. It seems almost as if in desperation, poring over the surveillance footage looking for anything that could be a possibility. As stated earlier, they did later search the property of a suspect and take possession of his truck, but as of this day, no new findings have come as a result of this. A private investigator working for the Speier family did levy accusations against another ex-con, not the one whose home was searched, who lived in the area and drove a white truck. However, this individual submitted to a polygraph test, and he passed it. The naked gunman theory also doesn't feel too strong. It's always hard to take the word of an inmate who overheard another inmate telling a story. I know that this is a trope of crime films and television, but in reality, it's incredibly difficult to take the word of an inmate who saw something about the case on TV. People talk, and a lot of people, when they're in prison, attempt to make themselves seem like they're bigger than they are. Criminals lie, and they especially lie to each other. In addition, Chris Hammersley denied ever making the claims, and since he himself wasn't directly involved, you'd think if he had additional information about what happened to Lauren, he'd be trying to use that as leverage to help himself out, not choosing to keep his mouth shut about it. Lauren's parents had, in the past, said that the Bloomington police weren't being very cooperative with them. We know from earlier statements that there is surveillance footage of Lauren speaking to a person that the police have chosen not to publicly identify. Also, there are allegedly further photos and footage of Lauren from the night she disappeared which have yet to be released. It's easy to say that these items should be out there to assist in the case, but the police often hold back specific details in order to ensure that they can verify claims about what happened and use this information to test the story of anyone they charge with participation in her disappearance. It's a common police tactic. It's all too often that a case such as Lauren's receives intense attention from both police and media, only to trail off as the case grows cold. The Bloomington police, however, contradict these statements and say they have been very direct with her parents and continued the investigation. So then, 2 years ago in 2015, the tragic murder of Hannah Wilson takes place. Her case is incredibly emotional and painful, but it's solved, and rather quickly due to mistakes made by her killer, Daniel Messel. It's during the lead up to the trial that the police and others begin to make connections between the murder of Hannah Wilson and the disappearance of Lauren Spierer. In my opinion, the similarities are chilling. Hannah attended the same bar that Lauren had been in the night she disappeared. Both girls are University of Indiana students, both have been drinking, both vanished for a period of time. We know, due to the trial, that Messel had planned to take Hannah Wilson away from town into a desolate area, but due to the weather and the bridge, was unable to, and this delay results in Hannah waking up and prompts Messel to commit a violent murder. So is it possible that Lauren didn't wake up or couldn't struggle and Messel managed to get her to that desolate area, murder her, and hide the body? I do wonder if the police have searched the area he was planning to take Hannah in hopes of finding traces of Lauren. A lot of times, these guys have places they feel safe, and they're unlikely to change it up. In relation to Messel, you've got the letters of David Hayden. Hayden is the man who claims to have helped Messel move the body of Lauren Spierer. It's the details in his letter which bother me. Not so much what he says, but the way in which he describes Lauren. He specifies her clothing, which at the time was public knowledge, but then he goes further saying, quote, a dark thong, no bra, and several rings on one hand, end quote. This is fairly specific. and going beyond the basic description and adding in a few extra details that weren't necessarily known to the public. I still can't determine if Lauren in fact had rings on one hand, outside of a statement from the family which says they had bought her a ring for her 20th birthday and she may have been wearing it that night. There's no way to corroborate his information about her bra and underwear. He also claims that Lauren had an ID on her with the name Rebecca. Lauren's older sister's name is Rebecca, and the information we have that Lauren used a fake ID to get into the bar that night seems like a legitimate claim that needs further investigation. The problem I find, however, is that we know Lauren left her purse and keys in an alleyway and left her phone and shoes at the bar. It seems unlikely she'd still have her ID on her. In addition, David Hayden is a psychiatric inmate whose letters were not admissible in court. Regardless of David Hayden's statements, even Lauren's parents agree that Messel is likely responsible for what happened to their daughter. Whether or not this ever comes out, or if by some strange twist a new suspect arises, remains to be seen. Lauren's case is confusing, convoluted, and tragic. The idea that a 20-year-old college student can simply disappear is haunting. We don't know exactly what happened to Lauren, but there has to be hope that someday we will. Someone has the answer, and whether that person is one of Lauren's former friends, her former boyfriend, a man convicted of murder, or some yet unknown suspect is simply impossible to find an answer to given what we currently know. The mystery of what happened to Lauren Spierer continues to haunt her parents, and has become a cautionary tale for college students in Bloomington and nationwide. If you're interested in finding more information about the disappearance of Lauren Spierer, there are many web pages and news sites that have covered it. A quick Google search of Lauren Spierer will bring up several different sites where you can explore the case. Lauren's last name is spelled Spierer. Lauren's family runs a website with further information at findlauren.com. There are also links to further information on the Lauren Spierer case posted in our Facebook group. The Facebook group can be found simply by searching for Trace Evidence Podcast. If you have information regarding the disappearance of Lauren Spierer, please contact the Bloomington Police Department in Bloomington, Indiana. What do you think happened to Lauren Spierer? I want to hear your theories and thoughts on this case. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Trace Evidence Podcast and invite you to join our Facebook group. Simply search for Trace Evidence Podcast. Let us know how you found the podcast and what you'd like to hear in the future. In addition to joining the Facebook group, you can contact me with questions, comments, or case suggestions at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. That's TRACEVIDENCEPOD@gmail.com. I'm very eager to hear your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a good rating on iTunes and leave us a review. This will greatly help our reach and bring more attention to the cases we cover. In addition to iTunes, the Trace Evidence Podcast is now available on Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, and Pocket Casts. Just search for Trace Evidence. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at TraceEvPod. That's TRACEEVPOD. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us for the next episode of Trace Evidence. In the meantime, I look forward to hearing from you. Stay safe.